Yeah.
Some unjust should become
Yes. Okay, that's fine. Okay, if you do have nectar devotion on your phone, on your book, on your book version, that would be good. Even if you have on phone. I'm not planning to read through unless we come through some verses or something. So, on the turn. Om Jnanatimirandasya Jnananjana Shalakya Chakshurunlitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobhishtam Sthapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamayam Dadati Swapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Yuta Padakamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavamstra Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sakana Raghunatanvitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sagana Lalita Shri Vishakhan Vitamascha He Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dinabandho Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostate Tapta Kanchana Gorangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vishabhanu Sute Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Vanchakalpatarubhischa Kripa Sindhubheva cha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Namo Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prishtaya Bhutale Shrimate Bhaktivedanta Swami Nityanamine Namaste Saraswata Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschatya Deshatarine Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shivasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Okay, so we are studying Nectar of Devotion, and it's nice that one person has a booklet out, two people. Okay. So, I guess firstly, what is the Nectar of Devotion? Anybody to tell? So, I mean, we know it's Bhaktivedanta Sindhu summarized by Srila Prabhupada, but what actually is Nectar of Devotion for our life?
How to be in spiritual life.
Okay, instructions on spiritual life. It's described as a law book for devotees. Because when you go through Nectar of Devotion, you see there's many principles, many facets of devotional life that we kind of just do. But the Nectar of Devotion is explaining why we do them. It's explaining the law and giving us the law as well. So up till now, I believe you've covered up to chapter 8. Is that correct? Yeah. So Karan's asked me to cover chapters 9 and 10. So chapter 9 is further considerations of devotional principles. How do you guys usually go through? Do you guys read and then discuss, or do you just discuss? Depends on the teacher. Okay. Okay, fine. So I'll go through discussion version. And if we come across anything, has everybody read these chapters? No? Okay. Anybody at all? Okay. So first section. So in chapter 9, further considerations of devotional principles. There's quite a few devotional principles that is described. And you can see that's the theme, you know, there's 64 that I just originally talked about, and then we start elaborating on all of these. So the first one that's given in this chapter is about blasphemy. What do people understand to be blasphemy?
Like
Just general.
Like abusing the devotee.
Abusing devotees?
Abusing the devotee and like you know, like what's this Supremo and then
The blasphemy.
Yeah, the blasphemy. Yeah. He's taking care of that.
Okay. Taking Mickey, basically, in one sense, harming somebody else, right? Whether it's through words or through physical action. Yeah, so here Srila Prabhupada actually gives a quote from the 10th canto, 74th chapter, verse 40. He says, "My dear king, if a person after hearing blasphemous propaganda against the Lord and his devotees does not go away from that place, he becomes bereft of the effect of all pious activities." So here we're talking about blasphemy of devotees. And actually this is one verse, but there's 3 different things that we should do when we hear blasphemy of devotees. So if I pull it back, you should have already discussed blasphemy because it comes up in chapter 6 as well, about how do you deal with somebody blaspheming you. You tolerate, right? You tolerate it. You don't act on it. You don't retaliate. But here, in this section, there's 3 different ways to deal with blasphemy of other devotees or the Lord comes up. The first one is that we should be expert enough to say something back, to basically defeat their argument. So if I'm blaspheming Kiran, right, then if somebody is qualified enough, capable enough to stop me from blaspheming Kiran, to defeat my argument, then that's one way to deal with blasphemy. Failing that, then it's described that if we can't defeat the argument, then what we should do is we should kill ourselves. We should commit suicide, because we shouldn't be tolerating blasphemy of other devotees. And failing that, we should just leave the place. And that's what Shukadeva Goswami is talking about in this verse, where if we hear blasphemous propaganda against the Lord and his devotees, we should go away. Because if we don't go away, then we lose all of our pious activities. Can anybody think of examples in the Bhagavatam where somebody kills themselves because they hear blasphemy, or they leave the place because of blasphemy? Yeah? Do you remember the pastime?
Shiva was insulted by Daksha. And, he collectively Bhagavad.
Yeah. So it's a pastime where Daksha, who is the father of Sati, and Sati's husband is Shiva, who's a great devotee, we understand. Vaishnavanam Yatha Shambhu is the greatest devotee, Shiva is. And once Sati goes into the house party, because naturally, she's a householder, she's a daughter, she wants to go to the celebrations at her father's place. But Daksha starts criticizing Shiva in front of Sati. And so Sati can't tolerate this. Chapters 9 and 10, Nectar Devotion.
What about?
Chapter 9, we just started. So we're just talking about blasphemy right now. So Sati can't tolerate this. Now, she can't speak back because it's her own dad. And so she decided to do the next best thing, which was commit suicide, kill herself. So she, using her own internal potency, she created the fire to then burn herself alive. So that's 3 different ways that it's described, actually. So yeah, be expert enough to defeat the argument, give up your life, or leave the place. Now, why would we, on one side, we learned Trinadapi Sunicana, where we should tolerate, give everybody respect, tolerate. But then on this side, we see that Prabhupada and Rupa Goswami is saying that actually we should protect, we should go back and chastise the offender, or stop their argument. We should commit suicide, or we should leave. How is that tolerant? Or is it tolerance? What's the difference between Trinadapi Sunicana and this idea that we have 3 things that we should do when we hear blasphemy?
I think it's more classical, but a lot of it's like situational. They're really tolerant, and sometimes that's not what this happens. Why they might, it's their benefit.
Okay, for their benefit.
You should tolerate when the offense is towards you, but not when it's towards someone else.
Yeah, this idea that Trinadapi Sunicana is about us being more humble than a blade of grass. But that humility is because we recognize that our position is very minimal. But the devotees, they're servants of the Lord. And so we don't tolerate when the servants of the Lord or the Lord himself is being offended. And there's a pastime, I forget who it is, but I think this was quite early on, maybe during Srila Prabhupada's time. But there was a devotee that, like in Africa, obviously you can understand that there's a lot of riots and stuff that goes on. There was a group of hooligans that wanted to basically kill all the people in the temple. But they had one rule, that they wouldn't kill women or children. So they went to the temple, then they separated the men from the women and the kids. And they were basically saying that we're going to kill the men, but women and children, you can be left alive. But one of the Matajis, she was self-accepted, she was understood this idea of Niradapi Sunachana and this idea of blasphemy, how to not, we shouldn't tolerate other devotees being harmed or chastised. She stood up and she was like, no, you can't do this. If you want to kill these, then you have to kill me first, because I can't tolerate where somebody else, another devotee, is being offended, killed in my presence. I don't remember I don't know if anybody knows the past one.
I've heard about it.
I don't remember the name.
Yeah.
Sounds familiar. But this was in Africa, so yeah. I don't know if anybody knows the rest of it, but
Yeah, so they brought them to, according to my memory, maybe not very accurate. They brought the men as well as the Mataji to this side of the one river, and there they executed them.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I don't know what happened. I know they got more with
the Mataji also, right? Yeah.
But I don't know. There's something happened maybe in the beach as well.
I mean, this idea that she could have just been scot-free, right? Because she was a woman, she could have just been scot-free. But she was willing to tolerate her own misfortune, but not tolerate the misfortune of the other devotees. And that's the important takeaway. So for ourselves, we need to learn 3 things, right? Amarinda Prabhu talks about BCC. In emails you have CC, BCC. BCC means that we shouldn't blame, complain, or criticize. Because we shouldn't be the ones who blaspheme or criticize or offend others. But the way that starts is when we start blaming, complaining, or criticizing other devotees. But on the other hand, we need to be mindful that when other devotees are going through something, we should be willing to stand up for them, to protect them. Or we should leave the place if we don't feel like we can stand up. We should leave. Because let's be honest, putting ourselves in the position of committing suicide is not something many of us would do. We're not at that stage where we'd be willing to go through something like that, Mataji, like Sati. So that's blasphemy. Hanuman also didn't attack though, right?
Recently, the Prabhu has shared in Harinam, they go to Central Island. I think probably Assam. Yeah. Mataji and Prabhu is there. I think those there, right? There's one guy came who's a drunkard. Yeah, he's agitating Mataji. The Prabhu has seen him and he hit him on the shoes. And he was all right then. Then he came to temple after that, he became a devotee. Yeah.
I don't think I would start with physical. But
Yeah, that's right.
this idea of, because see, we're not here to see there's proactiveness in causing harm, and then there's defense, right? There's being reactionary. We can be proactively defensive, and the world will teach you offense is the best defense. Especially if you do martial arts, offense is the best defense. But as devotees, we want to give people the benefit of the doubt as well. We don't want to be the ones who cause the offense first. Because you see in Srila Prabhupada's pastime as well, where he was staying with, I'm terrible with names, he was staying with one of the hippies initially in the same room. Then because drugs a lot more heavier, etc., he started then almost attacking Srila Prabhupada. Srila Prabhupada could have just like done one of the other hippies to like do something to that person that he was staying with, but he didn't. He just found a way to leave the place, and the other people helped him. Okay, so that's blasphemy. Next section talks about tilak and tulsi beads. How many of us wear tulsi beads or tilak outside the temple? We're willing to, on the tubes. Okay, so everyone, as in willing to. Yeah. Okay, cool. So generally all of us, I guess, are at the stage where we've accepted that we want people to recognize who we are, that we are devotees, you know? Oftentimes you find that those who start off the spiritual life, they're very hesitant, isn't it? They're like, I don't want to show my tilak. I don't want people to know that I'm a Hare Krishna. But then we grow through it. But there's another benefit which is described here from the Padma Puran, that just by their presence, when devotees are wearing tilak and tulsi beads, just by the presence, it makes the world purified, and anywhere they remain, they make that place as good as Vaikuntha. So just by having people see our tilak, us wearing tulsi beads, then we make the whole world purified, and anywhere we stay, we make that place as good as Vaikuntha. So generally we see the 12 markings, right? The tilak markings. It's for our body's protection. We consider it a temple. The body is a temple for Vishnu, which is why we create the 12 temples as well. But then this idea that if others see you in that attire, they become purified. So that's an additional benefit for wearing tilak. And so you see, like many times, even devotees in Srila Prabhupada's times, they may well, not wear the dhoti kurta, but they'll still wear the tilak. And there's other benefits described in the Hari Bhakti Vilas as well. So things like it destroys our sins, which we spoke about. Hari always remains with us. And we've got Vishnu's marks, so Vishnu always stays with us. And then it says Yamraj stays away, which I think generally all of us know the pastime with Ajamil. Yes. So in the Bhagavatam, there's a pastime where there's a Brahmana, a great Brahmana who was very pious, who's very good for most of his lifetime. And at some point, he came in contact with a prostitute. And from there, his life degraded. And what happened is that he had many children with that prostitute, and then he had a small boy at one point. And at that time, quite a few Vaishnava Brahmanas were passing that village, and they told him, like, you've been living your life with a prostitute and committing so many sins and offenses for so many years now. Like, just do one thing and just name your son Narayan. And so this Brahmana was then very, very old, and he was basically almost about to die, but his son was named Narayan. And he had so much attachment for his son that just by calling out Narayan at the very last breath, the Yamadutas came because of his impious activities, because of his sins. But then the Vishnu Dutas also came because he called out the name of Narayan. And so Yamaraj and the Yamadutas then had a conversation, because the Yamadutas were confused. Who are these Vishnu Dutas? How could they have stopped us from taking this Brahmana who was so impious, committed so many sins? And the Yamaraj then explained that actually I have no authority to touch a devotee. None of my people have authority to touch a devotee. Who is a devotee? Somebody who has tilak, who has kantimala, somebody who says the name of Hari. So just by wearing tilak, just by wearing tulsi beads, Yamaraj can't touch us. And then a few other things as well, like just by wearing kantimala, we achieve the benefits of more than 1 million like pious activities, like all the different pujas that you get, the demigod worship pujas, etc. More than 1 million times benefit just by wearing kantimala. And also there's another pastime with Srila Prabhupada, and one of his personal servants in Los Angeles, I think this was, where, I mean, naturally, if you've worn tulsi beads for quite a while, you see that sometimes they break, right? Like mine have broken a few times. And this devotee, this personal servant, his broke. So it was like, okay, I need to go and serve Srila Prabhupada, so I'll fix it later. He let it aside. He said he'll fix it later. And Srila Prabhupada saw, where's your tulsi bead? Where's your kanchimala? And then the devotee was saying that, it broke, so I said, I'll fix it later. I thought I'll fix it later. And Prabhupada was like, no, immediately go, get it fixed. If you understood how bad the situation in this world is, dukhala mishashvatam, padam padam yatvipadam, this idea that every step there's danger, you could literally trip and fall and die, then you wouldn't stay even a moment without your tulsi beads around your neck. Because imagine, say you take your tulsi beads off, you trip, you fall, you die. Yamaraj is coming straight because you don't have them. But if you have your tulsi beads, then Yamaraj will be like, oh, even though he's fallen, even though he's on his deathbed, I can't touch him. So that's tulsi beads. Now, here's an interesting question. So I just spoke about how kanchimala we wear everywhere, right? Including the bathroom, everywhere we go. But japa beads are also made of tulsi, right? So what's the difference between japa beads and kanchimala? Because both are tulsi. But we can also chant the holy names in the bathroom. I mean, whilst we're washing, we probably would.
Is it japa? It's not different.
It's not different too. But the holy names we can chant in the bathroom also. So japa beads, because there's 108, right? Like, I think some of us may have heard, why is there 108 beads? And one of those is that 108 beads represents the 108 prime gopis. The respect of the gopis, we don't bring them into the bathroom, right? Whereas tulsi mala is protecting us. Tulsi mala is there. So it's not even so much about the tulsi, the fact that the beads are tulsi. It's the fact that they represent the devotees that we're trying to connect with. So, any questions, comments so far? Okay, so for most of the rest of the chapter, actually, Rupa Goswami and Srila Prabhupada talk about deity worship a lot, different aspects of deity worship, which we'll go through. But we see that in Kali Yuga, we understand that the Yuga Dharma is what? Harina, chanting of the holy names. And yet here in this chapter, we see that Rupa Goswami has very much emphasized many, like, I think it's like 10, 15, I don't know how many, but actually 14 different aspects of deity worship. Interesting, we can see that it's basically because if you think of deity worship, okay, Harinam is the Yuga Dharma, but Harinam is also about meditating and applying our consciousness in the chanting. It's not just being able to say, do lip service to the name. It's about being able to actually go deep in the meditation, the thought, in the absorption in the holy name. And then we also understand from other aspects of the Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, Sarvapadi Vinumuktam Tatparatvena Nirmilam Rishikena Rishikesha Sevnam Bhaktir Uchyate. This idea that we engage all of our senses in the service of the Lord. And if we look at different aspects of deity service, we see all of our senses get occupied in Krishna's service. What are our senses, right? We have 5 senses. What are they? Take one each.
Tongue.
Taste. Tongue, taste.
Touch.
touch, smell, vision, eyes, hearing, right? Now, when we think of deity service, I mean, if you're doing Pujari service on the altar, then touch is right there. Taste is there because of Prashadam. Eyes are there, sight because of the deities. Hearing is there because of the arti, the kirtan that's going on in the arti, which we're missing. And smell is there because of the flowers, the incense, and things like that. So you see, all 5 of the senses and the 6th, the mind, all get occupied in the service of the Lord just through deity service. So different ones are described. So first one, if we see accepting flower garlands, right? This idea that, when we have a speaker in the morning, right, we're always offering them garlands, isn't it? But we don't just create garlands and offer it, we give them the deities garlands, because that's mercy that we're giving them. They're getting mercy. Then another one is dancing before the deity. That's one thing I need to learn. But of course, it's about graceful dancing. It's not about going mad in dancing, Like sometimes what used to happen especially is that devotees would just dance so randomly. I mean, there's ecstatic dancing, but then there's just like aggressive dancing as well. And devotees will start hurting each other and pushing into each other and stuff. But that's actually not recommended, because it's about pleasing the Lord, not pleasing ourselves. So when we dance, it's graceful. And even if you don't know how to dance, then do something. Dance in some way, whatever way you can, but in a graceful way. And you see Srila Prabhupada, like, comes out with a Swami step, Like, there's nothing big, nothing elaborate, just a simple move, just to dance for the Lord. And oftentimes you hear the phrase that actually in the spiritual world, every step is a dance, every word is a song, every day is a festival. So dancing is actually a prime thing in the spiritual world as well, because what does dancing represent for us, right? If forget the devotion side, generally when people are dancing is because they're happy. What else is there to be happy about other than dancing for the Lord? In bliss. Another one described is bowing down in honor of the deities. This idea of vandanam, which comes in Bhagavad Gita 2 times actually, right? This idea of paying obeisances. You guys have covered Bhagavad Gita, right?
Yeah.
So which verses are repeated twice? Okay. Yeah. Translation?
Yeah.
For any of them.
Obeisances unto
Yeah, one of those is obeisances, right? So even in the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna says twice that devotees pay obeisances. Says other things, but paying obeisances is one of them. And generally we see that paying obeisances has multiple functions actually. One is that naturally if we're humble, we take the lower position. Right? If you have 2 friends meeting, then they'll embrace, because they consider themselves equal, right? But if you have a junior and a senior, somebody who's very submissive, somebody who's taken the humble position, they don't feel worthy to have the embrace. Their place is at the feet. And so when we're paying obeisances, we're actually falling flat down out of humility, called Dandavat Pranam is called, right? Because we're saying, my whole life, my whole existence is at your feet. Then the other thing is that by doing that, we're also honoring the Lord as the supreme, as the master, because the position of a servant is always lower than the master. So when we pay obeisances, we're also recognizing that. Another one described is following the deity. So has anybody been to Mayapur, Vrindavan, or other temples outside of Manor that have like big processions? Yeah? Radhadesh. Do they have it? Okay, Harinam. I don't know if Radhadesh do this, but I know Mayapur and Vrindavan definitely do this, right? So when you have Guru Puja going on, then they end up taking Gaurnitai deities in Prabhupada, they take them for a procession around the temple. Prabhupada, we do a lot in Vrindavan. And, so that's just a devotee, right? We're talking about a devotee, Srila Prabhupada. But then we have Rath Yatra, where the Lord Jagannath is going on a procession. And it's described that we should follow the deity, whether it's in front of us or behind us. Now, initially it might be intellectual exercise for us because it's like, okay, you know, Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu nectar devotion says that you must follow the deity, so follow the deity. But at some point you come to an ecstatic stage where you're like, I want to follow because it's such an ecstatic experience to just go in the Harinam, experience the Rath Yatra festival, go around with Srila Prabhupada. It's such an ecstatic feeling. But then there's also another level where you then just can't bear the separation, and so you start following the deity. And a prime example of this is in Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 1, where Krishna has just left Indraprastha from the Pandavas. He's just left. And all of the Pandavas, all of the Vasis, all the residents of Indraprastha come and follow Krishna up until halfway point because they don't want to leave Krishna. So they follow him all the way to the halfway point before going back. And at the halfway point, or the Dwarkavasis, which is where Krishna was going, they, as soon as they found out news that Krishna was coming, they went to the halfway point to collect it. No? Because they're like, they don't want to be separated from the Lord. As soon as they found out that the Lord is going to come or leave, they're ready. They're ready to be with the Lord as much as they can. Another one is going to the temple, places of pilgrimage. So I think generally we understand this idea that also circumambulating the temple, I think is one of the, it's the next one as well. We're always going around in this world through the cycle of birth and death. And in order to get out of that cycle of birth and death, it's described that we should take the cycle of going around the temple. Just by taking rounds of the temple 4 times in Chaturmasya, it's described, you actually get the benefits of taking circumambulating the entire universe. Yeah. And also seeing all the holy places on the river Ganges. Just by circumambulating the temple 4 times in Chaturmasya. So I understand that the energy is very low. How can we increase the energy? No, genuine question. I'm not trying to say anything.
Well, I'm fine. Most of the people are asking,
I don't know if that will help. Does anybody know any pranayama yoga? Okay. Let's continue. But I'm conscious I don't want you guys to fall asleep.
maybe should we open the window?
We can try that. You can turn the light on as well.
It's pretty long.
No, I know. I've done Bhakti Shastri whilst I was in ashram as well. It's
No, it's just only the open. That's only the open. And late night, Friday night, and late night.
Please do put your questions in chat, Rathan, and get them probably if you have any questions. Okay, so hopefully the light and the fresh air will help. Hopefully, I don't know. But yeah, you know, it's recommended that we should always be proactive in our activities. So that usually means, or when we're studying, it's good to have notebook and pen because then you write things down. So it's not just passive listening. And even when you look at both sides, right? If you look at material learning and spiritual learning, you've got a pyramid, right? You've got a learning pyramid in the material world, where if you just do passive learning, you only retain about 10 to 20%. If you do something active, it goes to about 70%. And then if you actually teach other people, it goes to like 90, 95%. And then our scriptures, we have, I don't even remember the Sanskrit anymore. Jeez. Shravanam, Mananam, Nididhyasanam. Shravanam is hearing. It's passive. But then when you take it into the contemplation, when you do something active and think about it, manan, it goes deeper. And then nididhyasanam is when you apply it into life, when you teach others or bring that principle into life. That's, again, it's the same pyramid, but from a Shastric perspective. But we add the fourth element in our life, which is vandanam, which is praying, which we spoke about. So, obeisance, praying.
Yeah, so the same thing like
Is more active than just hearing, right? That's the idea. I mean, it's also better if we go back to the notes, but just merely like having this idea that, okay, I've heard something and I want to take note of it because it feels important. It touches me and it helps us. You see, like many, Ananta Gopal Prabhu is like amazing with this. And even, I think Paramakaruna Prabhu does this. But quite a few devotees you see in the morning Bhagavatam class, they'll sit with a notebook and pen. They won't write like everything down, but certain things that stick out, they write down because it helps. And I don't know if you guys have ever associated with Ananta Gopal Prabhu, just one-on-one. Living, breathing Bhagavatam, right? He just knows verses, he's able to bring verses, and then it's like his eyes are always blissful because he's always taking from Shravanam to Mananam and Nididhyasanam. Okay, so next one, Archana, right? Another aspect of deity worship. Archana, we understand, is one of the limbs of bhakti as well, right? This idea of worshipping the deity. Then there's rendering service to the Lord. And in the section, Shukpa describes that it's just like how a king is served by his attendants. Now, if a king was to come, if the prime minister was to come, and we invited the prime minister home, naturally we'll try and offer the best we can. The best food, the best vessels, the best seat. In the same way, when we're serving the Lord, the idea is that we give the best we can. We have the verse in Bhagavad Gita, Patram Pushpam Palam Toyam, this idea that the Lord is satisfied by a leaf, a flower, water, and fruit. But if we have means to do more than that, then we should do. Those four are the bare basics that we can provide. Because a leaf, flower, fruit, water, even somebody who's poor, somebody who doesn't have anything, they can find it in nature. But if you have means to offer more, we should offer more. And one for you guys, in the same section, Prabhupada talks about how just by residing in the temple, we can attain the transcendental abode. Just by staying in the temple, you can attain transcendental abode. So, something for the brahmacharis. Okay, partaking of prasadam. It doesn't seem like anybody here likes prasadam, right? No? Okay. What's the prayer that we say when we just before we start honoring prasadam? Does anybody know the translation? Rough, doesn't have to be it. The tongue is ferocious. Of all the senses, the tongue is the most ferocious. But we have Krishna's mercy that we can purify and control the tongue through the prasadam. So it's very much for our benefit in one sense. It's described that eating prasadam is actually equal to 10,000 pious activities from sacrificial rites. So performing 10,000 yajnas is equal to eating prasadam. That's pretty powerful. So, I mean, I don't know about you guys, but it just makes sense to eat prasadam, not eat anything else but prasadam, because every time you eat prasadam, more benefits than 10,000 sacrifices. Don't talk about Janamrit, yeah?
But what about Ekadashi?
Ekadashi, we still eat prasadam. Ekadashi, So different Ekadashis have different pastimes behind them. But Ekadashi comes from Ekadasi, who's one of the maidservants of Krishna in one sense. I don't know if anybody does know the full pastime. Okay, so I mean, I don't know if half the story is better than no story, but Ekadasi basically came from Krishna's heart at some point, because Krishna, actually, yeah, better I don't give half the pastime, because then it would just get jumbled up. But yeah, we can find it because it's very well documented, and there's also Ekadashi Mahatmya as well that talks about all the different Ekadashis in the year, pastimes behind them, and also why Krishna is glorifying that pastime. That Ekadashi.
What is it called? We can find all that.
Ekadashi Mahatmya. It's very widely available, so you can probably just find a PDF.
Thank you.
That's what we live on. Yeah. Then drinking Janamrit. Does anybody know what Janamrit actually is?
The feet, what did I do? Wash the feet of the Lord.
Yeah, so when they're cleaning washing the Lord, then they'll have water with incense, with flowers, with perfumes and stuff like that. And all that obviously goes down to the feet and washes the feet as well. And then we collect it. And then we add yogurt to it. So it gives a nice material taste. And because it's coming from the body of the Lord, it purifies us as well. Another one, smelling incense and flowers. Just by smelling incense and flowers, so many impersonalists became devotees. And a classic example is the four Kumaras. Does everybody know the pastime with the four Kumaras? Okay, so in the Bhagavatam it's described, and you see this is kind of a core pastime that then leads to many of the other pastimes taking place. But the four Kumaras are basically sons of Brahma, who Brahma had created to originally procreate in the world. But the four Kumaras were like, we recognize the value in staying celibate and in just focusing on spirituality. But they were impersonal. They didn't have a perception of Bhagwan, of a supreme being. Their idea of spirituality was, oneness. And like this, because they had the ability to just stay as small children, they just went around anywhere. Kids can go anywhere, right? Like if you see like 3-4-year-old toddlers, they can literally just go anywhere, Who's going to stop them? So these four Kumaras ended up making their way to the border of the Vaikuntha planets. And there's guards, Jai Vijay. There's 7 gates into the Vaikuntha planets. They got past 6, and at the 7th gate, they were stopped by Jai Vijay. And these Kumaras were like, who are you to stop us? Like, can you not see we're Brahmanas, this, that, and the other? Like, we should be allowed entrance. And then they basically want to curse Jai Vijay to basically fall down into the material world. And that's where you get like Hiranyaksha, Hiranyakashipu, and all these other personalities that came because they're Jai Vijay in those forms. But at that point in the pastime, Vishnu with Lakshmi, with Garuda, comes onto the scene. Because, Vishnu knows what's going to happen, right? Mm. And just by smelling the flower garlands and the tulsi leaves, the four Kumaras became so attracted to Vishnu. Their impersonal conception was like, we thought this impersonal thing was highest, but we're so attracted that we recognize there's something beyond the impersonal realization. And then we see, although it's not related to smelling flowers, but the same thing happened with Shukadeva Goswami. It was impersonalist, right? Shukadeva Goswami is the main narrator of the Bhagavatam that we see. Son of Vyasadeva. As soon as he was born, he was, he basically didn't want to leave the womb, because as soon as he came out, he knew, if I come out of the womb, Maya will attack me, the world will attack me, so I'd rather just stay in the womb. And so he stayed like that for 16 years. And Vishnu had to come and say, like, you come out and I promise you that you stay liberated. Maya won't affect you. So as soon as he comes out, he leaves. He leaves home because he's not attached. Because he's liberated. He's not attached. So he leaves. And Vyasadeva is like trying to get him back, like, come back, you know. And then Vyasadeva has to send two of his disciples to Shukadeva Goswami. With one disciple, he sends one verse, and with a second disciple, he sends a second verse. I'm not going to read the verses out because I don't remember the verses, but I know what they are. 3:2:23 and 10:21:5. Srimad Bhagavatam 3:2:23 and 10:21:5. 3:2:23 describes how Krishna, actually, let me go to the verse order. 10:21:5 describes how beautiful Krishna looks, describing his external features. And Shukadeva Goswami is like, wow, you know, like, I never knew somebody could look this amazing, this beautiful. But naturally in the world, we see that somebody looks beautiful on the outside. Their inside character is not necessarily matching, right? Usually they're either externally good, but internally quite hollow, or internally very good, but externally they don't look so great.
I was thinking about this the other day with karma, how it can affect the way you look. So is it good karma to look good, or is it bad karma to look good? Right.
Are you saying like natural, right? We're talking the way, like,
Some looks, you know.
okay. So actually it's described in Queen Kunti's prayers, is described that actually having a good family, having beauty, having wealth, and having education are just reactions of the pious activities that we've previously had. So it's just the reaction, you know, we're basically living out the good karma from previously.
Okay, so it is good karma type, right?
Yeah. It's the results of the karma. But those can be blockages on our spiritual path. So 10:21:5 is about the externals, but Shukadeva Goswami is like, okay, somebody might be externally good, but how can I be attracted? Because internally they might be hollow. So then 3:2:23 is then spoken. And 3:2:23 talks about Krishna giving mercy to Putana. Putana came as a she-demon, as a female demon, to feed Krishna milk, and through the milk poison to kill Krishna. But Krishna, seeing the motherly aspect, gave Putana liberation, and not just liberation, but the position of a maidservant in the spiritual world. If I came to kill you, but I came as a father, you're not going to give me the position of a father in any lifetime. But Krishna gave the position of mother. So external and internal. So then Shukadeva Goswami became attracted to the Bhagavatam and to Krishna ultimately, from impersonal to become a devotee again. Then another one, touching the deities, which generally, obviously we know if you do Pujari service, even if it's at home, then you touch the deities. Then seeing the deity, right? Seeing the deity is one of the limbs as well. Prabhupada?
Like we have to, like 100% Suchi, like we can't do the number one as well, like before.
So ideally everything should be, you know, top class. But I guess for Prabhupada, I don't know what the standard is for Prabhupada in one sense. I mean, standard is always top class, right? Even for deity worship, when we do Pujari service, the ideal is that you don't even touch somebody else.
Yeah.
But it's sometimes impractical, right? Because so many people in the temple, especially in the manor, you know, like Pujaris don't have a separate entrance into the deity room. They have to go through the people, and somebody touches, they touch. So, yeah. I mean, in one sense, you could argue that everything should be top class. As Hari Bhakti Vilas also, I believe, says, we should be showering 3 times.
Suppose somebody is speaking to how do people not ask? It's a weird thing to ask.
Yeah, but that's okay. See, like, the way the devotees have set up, like Prabhupada, like if you see when you're doing Tulsi Puja, I don't know if the standard is still followed, but Tulsi Puja, like they had very strict standards about, you know, cleanliness as well as like the clothes you wear. Stitching is not allowed, generally. For deity worship, stitching isn't allowed. Even for Tulsi Puja, standard was that stitching isn't allowed, at least when I was in the ashram. So I don't know if you guys get asked if you're, you know, like on that sort of stuff. But generally it depends, you know. There's principles and then there's details. And details are details for a reason. But we should do our best, depending on where we are, to follow the principle and as much as we can the details. But otherwise you become very like so fixated on the details that you just forget to be a devotee and you become so fixated on the rules and regulations. Nectar instruction, you guys have covered it, right? Yeah. This idea of following the rules and regulations for the sake of following them, not for the spiritual advancement. Because like that, you see that Prabhupada quotes the Manu Samhita many times from different aspects of Manu Samhita. But if you actually read the Manu Samhita, I don't know if any devotee would be able to follow. You know, the Manu Samhita is codes of, you know, how to live human life.
But Kali Yuga, the no chanting, we can't follow everything.
Yeah, correct. But in order to aid the chanting, because remember, chanting isn't just lip service. Yeah. All the senses need to be purified. And part of that means the best is to come to the mode of goodness, the platform of goodness. And then from there, we can go to pure goodness. Because, see, on one level, bhakti is not contaminated by any of the modes. So somebody could be in the mode of ignorance and still perform bhakti. But that contamination is on us, not on bhakti. If we want to go deep in our spiritual life, we want to go into the ocean, dive into the ocean, then it's good for us to come to the mode of goodness, because then generally we're interacting with the world on a higher level of consciousness. So then it's easier for us to then go onto the train of pure goodness. But we need to remember that when we get onto the platform, we don't stay on the platform and miss the train. Because that's the danger that many of us have, actually. Okay. So yeah, seeing the deity is interesting because on the one level, we know at the Shri Krishna Namadi Na Bhaved Graya Indriya, this idea that our material senses can't actually perceive the Lord. Okay? We can't actually, with our material senses, what spirituality is there in our material senses? We can't see the Lord, we can't touch the Lord. And then here, Rupa Goswami talks about seeing the deities. You know? So how do we reconcile the two? That's the devotees. In one sense, yes. The idea that actually, yes, we're seeing the deities, but the idea isn't that we're seeing the deities. The idea is that the deities are seeing us. When we go in front of Krishna, at least for me, I speak for myself, I see a statue of Radha Krishna. Shastrically, I understand the Radha Krishna, which is why I call them Radha Krishna. But do I have the vision to actually see that they're the divine personalities themselves? If I did, maybe I'd be like the Indraprasthavasis or the Dwarkavasis and just never want to leave. But there I am, 5 minutes. It's like, okay, it's been 5 minutes. I need to go do something else. I'm going to leave. And so the idea isn't that we can't, I mean, yes, we go in front of Krishna with prayers, etc. But the idea is that we recognize that actually us going in front of the deities is because we're seeking mercy, seeking their blessings, their darshan. We say that we go for our darshan, for us to be able to see the Lord's, but actually the real darshan is when the Lord sees us. And you see in Mahaprabhu's pastimes, he would always stand beside or behind the Garuda Slam, right? Who is Garuda, a great, great devotee of Vishnu. So Mahaprabhu talks about how he's standing there because he has no qualification that Krishna would see him, that Jagannath would see him. But maybe by the fact that he's standing behind a great devotee, when Jagannath casts his eye on Garuda, then maybe, just maybe, I'll get the mercy by being in that vision of Jagannath. So seeing the deities and the deities seeing us, very important. And then a few other things that I describe which aren't directly about deity worship, but quite important for all of us, which I mean, most of us know anyway. Singing Sankirtan, right? Singing for the Lord, bhajan, kirtan, etc. And then also Sankirtan. Now it's described that actually there's 3 different types of Sankirtan. There's Nam Sankirtan, Leela Sankirtan, and Guna Sankirtan. Now, Nam Sankirtan we all generally recognize, Harinam Sankirtan. But then you've got Leela Sankirtan, which is about the pastimes, basically. Discussing and glorifying the pastimes. And then Guna, attributes, the qualities of Krishna. So all 3 of these are described as Sankirtan. Yeah. Generally, when we talk about Sankirtan in the sense of Nam Sankirtan, But when we're listening to Bhagavatam class, when we're glorifying the Lord's qualities, that's all Sankirtan also. And then you've got Japa, which we all know. Interestingly, why do we need Japa and Kirtan? Congregation. Is that the only reason why we need both?
But Japa is like personally you're communicating with asking Krishna, please give me to serve. Yeah, please bless me to be served.
Can't I just have Japa? Can't I just have Kirtan? Actually, it's described.
Still saying it out loud, but I don't know.
So it's described that actually Japa supports Kirtan and Kirtan supports Japa. Japa is like our personal endeavor. Like, I don't know about you guys, but Japa is so difficult. It's like you guys are tired now, like imagine 4:30 in the morning, if you come before Mangalarti, you start chanting at 4 or something, the head would just nod. But then Kirtan is going on and it's like everybody's wide awake. Because it's so much easier in Kirtan because everybody's there, there's music there, everything is easier. So Japa is described as our personal endeavor, and the Kirtan is described as basically the collective endeavor. The collective endeavor is good because then Krishna will actually look at us, because maybe some of these devotees that are chanting, Krishna is actually attracted towards their chant. So we get the mercy. But then Japa is important because we need to show Krishna our own personal endeavor that actually I want to connect with you also. It's not just about all of us connecting, but I want to connect with you. And many of you have probably heard the pastime of Damodar Leela, right? Where Krishna is getting bound. And it's described that when he's getting bound, Yashoda is always finding its 2 fingers too short. And again, we talk about this idea that there was Yashoda's endeavor, which was described as 1 finger. But then when she got the help of all the other gopis, of all the other personalities, then that brought Krishna, that bound Krishna, because personal endeavor was there and the collective endeavor. And then 2 other things that are described in chapter 9 is submission and prayer. So there's an important distinction between them when we talk about context of this chapter. So prayers here is not just about praying to the Lord. It's actually specifically in this chapter in context, talking about the prayers from the scriptures, from the acharyas, those prayers that have come from authentic sources. Whereas submission is our personal prayer. Yeah. Now, personal prayer can be of multiple different kinds, right? But generally you'll see that it's this desire to be completely fixed in serving the Lord. When we pray, then we'll bring so many different things in, right? Like I'm praying to pass my Bhakti Sastri. I'm praying for something else. Praying for forgiveness. You might pray for forgiveness, like, oh, we did this wrong thing, like, please forgive me for it. I didn't mean it, but I'm conditioned. This has happened. Or if you do any sort of deity worship, then you see in the Pujari room, got the forgiveness prayers there as well. Because once you've served the Lord, it's like you may have committed something unknowingly, so you pray for forgiveness. But this desire to be completely fixed in service of the Lord is the highest type of submissive prayer that we can have. The others are there, they're important. And depending on where we're at, we may have desires, we may have prayers for other things, submitting ourselves to Krishna because we've got other desires. But the most selfless desire, Shikshashtakam, last verse, whatever you do, just give me service. And it's described in this section how it's like the attraction between a young boy and a young girl, right? That's how much we want to be absorbed and attract that service. Young boy and young girl, they naturally just spontaneously get attracted to each other because of the hormones and everything else. They don't need anybody to come tell them, hey, you know, like you need to go and be with that person. No, they're just naturally ready to just be together. Same way we can pray to the Lord that, may I have that same attraction to you as a young boy would have towards a young girl, or a young girl would have towards a young boy. And then it also talks about submission as we become more advanced in our spiritual life, right? When we come to this Swarupa Shakti, or Swarupa Siddhi, sorry, where we start kind of recognizing what our constitutional identity is. And when I say constitutional identity, I don't just mean Jiva Swarupa Krishna Das, this idea that we're just servants of the Lord, but recognizing what our relationship is with the Lord. Then at that level, devotees then also start praying for that specific service to reach that, you know, completeness in that liberated stage. But we're not there yet. We don't start praying, oh, let me just be the person who fans you all the time or serves you all the time. We're still sadhana based. Sadhana bhaktas, right? And actually, at the end of that section, Srila Prabhupada emphasizes this idea of lolyam. What does lolyam mean? Lolyam.
Yeah.
Greed. This intense greed. And Srila Prabhupada talks about how this intense greed, this lolyam for devotional service, is our ticket to the spiritual world. Think about that carefully. Srila Prabhupada could have said that us doing service is our ticket to the spiritual world. Us chanting is our ticket to the spiritual world. But he says this intense greed for devotional service is our ticket to the spiritual world. He named this ISKCON, International Society for Krishna Consciousness, not Krishna Activities. Because the activities are there, but more important than the activities is the consciousness. If we have the greed for service, then naturally we will serve. But we don't have the greed for the service, which is why we focus so much on, we need to do these services. But if we flip the frame of reference from us needing to do service to us wanting to develop love for Krishna, then the service comes naturally to us. If you think about it, if you like somebody, whether it's a person of the opposite gender, your brahmacharis, so we'll go with best friend, right? If you really love somebody, your best friend, your mother, your father, your brother, your sister, I don't know, nieces, nephews, whoever it is, right? Somebody who really attached to you really like, you go out of your way to just do something that they like, that they need, that you can do for them. In the same way, with Krishna, many of us right now, at least I speak for myself, we're engaging in this because philosophically we think we should do it. I've been told devotees serve, therefore I'm going to serve. But if we develop the love, and which can come through the service, then we can actually connect with the service through love as well. Srila Prabhupada describes or translates bhakti as devotional service. Bhakti, when you look at the actual word, could mean devotion, could mean love. It says devotional service, because the idea is that if you actually have love, if you actually have devotion, you act in that relationship. It's not just a statement, I love you. It's actually, okay, you're saying it, but what you're doing about it. So there's something I thought I'd add as well, which I have written down. It talks about crying for devotional service, right? For pure devotional service. But we may find it difficult to cry for devotional service. It's like, I don't know if I want it. But then we can think about crying to cry for devotional service. Because at least philosophically, we recognize that this is what we want. But we may not have realized it. And then last one in this section is about prayers, which is spoke about, like basically prayers from the scriptures. You know, there's so many. Srimad Bhagavatam is basically full of prayers. You know, every chapter you probably have a prayer, you know. You've got Kunti Maharani's prayers, Bhishma Dev's prayers, Dhruva Maharaj's prayers, Vlad Maharaj's prayers, so many prayers. When we connect with some of these prayers, we can take them, print them out, or have them on our phone. And when we're in front of the deities, just recite the prayers. Same with the Acharya's prayers. We can recite them because oftentimes we may not be poets. We may not be very good with the language. But these prayers, because they're from great devotees, Krishna is attracted to the prayers automatically. And someone reciting them to Krishna, Krishna will get attracted because this devotee is praying the prayers that Dhruva Maharaj prayed. Like that. And when you look at prayers in general, in the Bhagavatam especially, when you analyze them, you see that there's always 4 parts to the prayers. 4 parts to the prayers. You see, most of the prayers start off with glorifying the Lord. You're so wonderful, this, that, and the other. Then it starts talking about how the appreciation that the devotee has for the Lord. That you've done this, you've done that, all these different things. And then the devotee submits their proposal, their request to the Lord. Glorified them, appreciated the Lord's position in their life, and then put forward their request. And after that, they ask for forgiveness. So generally, when you look at most of the prayers in the Bhagavatam, they follow this 4-step principle. So when we're putting our submissive prayer forward, they can try and create prayers like that as well, you know? Like when you're in front of the deities, Radha Gokulananda, you can glorify how they look. Then you can appreciate like the different services, that opportunities that have come your way, whatever's happened, you know, over the last 24 hours that really touched you. You can appreciate the Lord for it because at the end of the day, the Lord has sent it to you, which is why you got it. And then you may have a request, ideally pure devotional service. You can request the Lord. And then you can ask for forgiveness. Maybe if it's specific, it's good. Like, I did this thing wrong. Like, please forgive me. But then general also is nice. But we shouldn't just ask for forgiveness just because we think we should ask for forgiveness, you know. We should actually feel like, yes, there's something we need forgiveness for. And that's chapter 9. Any questions, comments on chapter 9?
No.
No? 2:50. Would you like a 5-minute break? I don't know if you guys usually get breaks.
Let me get some in my back.
Okay. Can you take a 5-10 minute break? Okay. Let's return at 3 p.m. 10 minutes from now.
Yeah.
So that gives everybody a break. Please do stretch your legs. Please do try and freshen up. Okay, Hare Krishna and Rasana and Sankirtan Prabhu, if you have any questions, please do put them in chat or you can speak up. Talk about the mode and everything in the world is affected by the 3 modes.
Yes, see. Yes, see.
Everything is affected by the three modes, right? So even the environment that we're in affects our consciousness. So the fact that we're studying in the same room that you guys are sleeping is actually not ideal. I mentioned it to Karan, but it's like,
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
time by circumstance also, right? Like,
We should
it's a
have
situation.
asked
We could have done that.
We feel like we give them
For
more.
the next session, just recommend it. Because actually, depending on the teacher, they might be okay with it.
We have been up so long.
Yeah.
He likes being outside.
Um,
Okay, anyway, we've got it. Go on.
Hindsight.
Oh, hindsight. Yeah. But I mean, you can suggest it for the next time before you guys start.
Foresight.
You can make it foresight. Yeah. Hindsight for this class, foresight for the next one. Okay, so that's chapter 9. Then chapter 10 is entitled Techniques of Hearing and Remembering. So in this, basically, there's four sections. Yeah, 4 sections, which are basically just talking about how to deepen our bhakti in one sense. Yeah, talks about hearing, talks about expecting the Lord's mercy, talks about remembrance, and then meditation. It's quite a short chapter, in one sense. The points are quite profound and very relevant. Like, how can we hear properly? How can we hear properly, right? What is this idea of expecting the Lord's mercy and then remembrance and meditation? What's the difference between remembrance and meditation also? So talk about hearing first. So here, obviously we know Shravanam, hearing, is the first limb of bhakti, right? Shravanam, Kirtanam, what are the other ones? Let's go in order. Okay, do you wanna? Just go for the order. Shravanam, Vishnu, Archanam, Vandanam, Dasyam, Sakhyam, Atmanivedam. What are these 9 names? Okay, so basically this verse comes in the Srimad Bhagavatam in Prahlad Maharaj's discussions with, what is it? Is it Nashmadev? Is it Hiranyakashipu? Okay, Hiranyakashipu? Yeah. I don't know if whether it's Prahlad speaking to Nashmadev or it's Prahlad speaking to Hiranyakashipu. I think. But yeah, it's basically 9 processes of devotional service, right? These are 9 things that we do in our devotional service. Shravanam, which is hearing. What's the next one? Kirtanam, which is chanting or singing. Next one? Smarana means remembering. Next one? Which is worship, which we spoke on in the last chapter as well. Next one? Which is? Yeah, okay. Obeisances and stuff as well. Next one? Before that? So Shravanam, Kirtanam, Vishnu Smaranam, Padasevanam, Archanam, Vandanam, Dasyam. So next one? Which is? And the next one, last one? Atmanivedanam. So Sakyam Atmanivedanam, which is complete surrender. Yeah. So basically these 9 things, you don't need to like get bogged down by them. But these 9 things are basically those limbs of bhakti that help us advance. So if you, when you're hearing, when you're singing, when you're worshipping the deities, etc., all these are different processes of our devotional service, which helps us advance. So here Rupa Goswami, Srila Prabhupada are very much emphasizing this point of hearing, right? And we understand that hearing is a very key sense for all of us. Yeah. When you're nodding off in Bhagavatam class and then a sudden switch in the sound happens and it's like, you wake up. It's like, I missed something. What was that? I promise I'm not sleeping. We go through this. But also when you see, if a man is sleeping and say a burglar comes in, somebody comes in to rob the place, somebody who comes in to rob, a burglar, wherever, temple, at home, wherever, then generally we see that sight is not going to do anything. Seeing the person is not going to do anything because their eyes are not even there. Smelling somebody's, even if they've got like a very potent smell, not going to do much. But if they hear the burglar, if they hear the one who's robbing, like they make a noise, then they wake up suddenly. Hearing is also, if I'm not mistaken, hearing is also the first sense that we develop in the womb. And when you think about the scriptures, sound is the first thing that Brahma hears. So this
What do you say?
tapa, austerity.
That's what it is. Oh, no.
How did you ask to everyone?
What?
Did you ask?
No, he hears the sound tapa. Yeah. So he's like thinking like, what should I do? What should I do? And then he hears the sound tapa. So he understands that he should perform some austerity.
How is some Krishna?
So we see even in the Bhagavatam, sound is key. And if we go to a very, the foundational book of Krishna consciousness, Bhagavad Gita, Arjun could just keep speaking and speaking like this. I'm thinking this, I'm thinking that. He does that, right? Chapter 1 is all about Arjuna's doubts, his emotional doubts, his intellectual doubts. But then what does he do? He goes, Karpanya dosho upahata svapava prichami tvam dharma samudha cheta. What? Right? He basically goes to Krishna and says, now I'm lost because of I've lost all my composure because of miserly weakness. He's basically accepting his prideful position. But then he says that I'm submitting myself to you, Krishna. He submits himself as the guru. He gives him the position of a guru. I'm going to be your shishya, your disciple. And I'm submitting myself to you. You please instruct me. He's telling Krishna, I want to hear from you. I want to hear what you have to say to me. So again, sound is very important. And you see, most of our scriptures are basically conversations. Most of our scriptures are basically conversations. The Bhagavatam is multi-layered conversation. Go on.
Make some of the songs.
It's okay.
Very nice.
If you're thirsty, drink. Right? Multi-layered conversations in the Bhagavatam, because it's carrying conversations within conversations within conversations. I don't know, the room went from like low energy to just like ecstatic energy. I don't know. Anyway, but yeah, just going multi-layered conversations because it's all about hearing. In the Bhagavatam, if you read the Bhagavatam or summary version, or even when you listen to morning class, if you follow the storyline, you see, okay, Sutta Goswami is speaking. Sutta Goswami is narrating the conversation between Shukadeva Goswami and Pariksha Maharaj. And then Shukadeva Goswami will start narrating conversations from other personalities like Maitreya and Vidura, etc., etc. But then they also will quote other conversations, right? This multi-layered conversations, because it's all about hearing. And that's the beginning of spiritual life. Many of us will come to spiritual life because we picked up a book and we're reading it. That's a form of hearing in one sense, when we're reading through something. Many of us would have spoken to devotees and come to devotion life. Okay, like this sounds interesting. Like, let me find out more. And then you go deeper and it's like you're hearing more and more. So hearing is like the prime limb of bhakti. for us to progress, to start and to progress. You see senior devotees, they will still continue to hear and read and study. Why? Do they not know the verses? They may have even memorized the verses, but they hear and read because there's so much more to get out when you keep revisiting. Material life is described like linear, right? If you want to learn anything in material life, it's something linear. You learn something, but then if you want to progress, you need to learn something new. Learn something new. You want a promotion, you need to learn some new skill. You want another promotion, new skill. But spiritual life is circular. If you think about spiritual life, everything you're learning in all the books that you've just been studying with with Bhakti Sastri, Bhagavad Gita, Ishopanishad, Nectar of Instruction, Nectar of Devotion, teaches you 5 basic things. What are the 5 topics of the Bhagavad Gita?
Atma,
Atma, the soul. Karma, which is activities. Kala, yeah, which is time. Prakriti, which is material nature. And the 5th, Ishvara, God. So there's 5 topics of the Bhagavad Gita. And when you look at anything in spiritual context that we learn, that we read through, we see we go through those 5 topics again and again. Srila Prabhupada, if you ever hear Srila Prabhupada's lectures, like on Monday mornings, almost every lecture you'll probably find he talks about we're a spirit soul, we're not this body. Almost every lecture you'll talk about it. Because spiritual life is actually cyclical. All the teachings in spiritual life are cyclical. It's not that we learn something new. We're learning the same thing, but from different angles. Okay, so hearing is so important for us. But it's also important to know what are the sources of, or which sources we should hear from. So many people in the world you find who have Bhagavatam Katha, who speak the Bhagavad Gita, or talk about the Bhagavad Gita, or the Bhagavatam, and all these scriptures that we have. But should we listen to all of them? Why?
They interpret their own things
So some have their own interpretations
for their own.
for their own benefit. So the scriptures themselves are pure. Just as milk is, you can get pure milk, like in the UK, at least I hope they don't, but they don't contaminate it with water. Whereas in India, you'll find that they mix it. Yeah. But you may have strong desire to have milk. Or amrit. Amrit is like nectar, right? But if a snake drinks some of that milk or some of the nectar, would you then drink it? No, because it becomes poison, right? So in the same way, this effect of when people who are materially contaminated and bring that material contamination into their katha, into their presentation of the scriptures comes in, then it's described like the snake tasting or drinking the milk or the nectar. We as devotees, we want to hear from the authentic sources that don't manipulate what is being presented. Because if it's manipulated, then it's not presented in a pure way. It's presented with the benefit of material life, whether it's for the person or for the listener. So you'll find many professional reciters, people who will recite the prayers, who will recite the Bhagavatam, or who will take money for speaking. Like, okay, I'll give you Bhagavatam Katha at your house for £100, whatever. But it's like, no, because a lot of the times you find that they're presenting it in a way that benefits them. Because there's many, many different parts of the scriptures that even the reciters are not able to follow. And you find that there's those who are perfectly trying to follow the scripture. They will present those points that they can't follow, not in the mood of you need to hear, but actually I'm speaking it because I need to develop this myself. For example, a speaker may speak about tolerance, but they might not themselves in their own life not be very tolerant. They're not speaking because you need to learn about tolerance, but they're speaking because actually they recognize they need to develop that quality. They get very angry, agitated very quickly, but they are okay speaking about it because this is what the scripture is saying. I'm not going to manipulate the scripture based on where I'm at. I'm going to present the scripture based on where the scripture is at and recognize that I need to come to that point. And that's why I'm speaking for my benefit, not for yours. If you get benefited, great. But I'm speaking because I need to develop this. And then the other thing is parampara, right? Authenticity comes from the fact that a guru, a speaker, is qualified to be a speaker because they've heard from their own spiritual master, their own guru. If I'm following perfectly what my teachers have told me, which means I've heard them perfectly, then I can present it perfectly. If I'm coming to the Bhagavad Gita by myself, likelihood is that I'm interpreting it my way based on my conditionings. And therefore, when I'm presenting it with my conditionings instead of based on the truth that comes down the parampara. And you would have discussed this in Bhagavad Gita, chapter 4, so I'm not going to go too much into it. So again, in this section, 3 types of hearing are described. There's Nam, Charitra, and Gunati. Nam is hearing about the glories of the holy name. Charitra is again glorious. Sorry? History. Yeah, these pastimes, basically. Pastimes of the Lord. And then Gunadi is the qualities of the Lord again. Yeah. So we discussed last time in which section? Kirtan, right? Yeah, Kirtan. Nam, Lila, Gun. Similarly here, hearing. Similar, you could say as Nam, Lila, Gun. Or Nam, Charitra. Why is hearing so important for us?
Yeah, I can change the
Change the mind. Transformation. Yeah. In the world, we see like whatever we do is off the back of hearing, actually. You know, like we go down a career path because we've heard it's like loads of money in that career path. So we explore it and go like, okay, now I'm going to grow in that. In spiritual life also, if we want to grow, if we want that transformation to take place, then we need to learn and develop our own depth in the philosophy. And that's why hearing is very important. Reading, studying, hearing is important. Because once you've heard that this world is dukkhalaya mashashvatam, this world is temporary and full of misery, then you can develop the vision to see things around you in that light, right? Something goes wrong, then if you've developed the vision of understanding dukkhalaya mashashvatam, then you see, okay, things are going wrong. That's the position of the world. So by understanding the scriptures, by hearing from the right sources, we can develop the right vision to take us out of the material world, right? And in the last part of this hearing section, it's described about 2 ways to practice Krishna consciousness in adversity, right? So when we go through an adversity, this dukkhalaya mashashvatam is actually affecting us in life. And it's described that we can take it in 2 ways. One is that we can, sorry, I'm talking about expecting Lord's mercy here. I don't know why I switched. Anyway, but yeah, when you hear, then what part of the hearing is that we expect the Lord's mercy, right? And yeah, so when we go through adversities, then we can understand this world is dukkhalaya mashashvatam because we've heard properly. And when we understand the world is dukkhalaya mashashvatam, then we see that actually our adversities are opportunities for us to practice sadhana bhakti. Because when we go through adversities, most people will go away from spiritual life. They're like, okay, I need to deal with this thing first, and then I can come back to spiritual life. Like, say, let's not go extreme, but let's say you purchased a house, you left the brahmachari ashram, and you purchased a house, let's say. I mean, I think the brahmacharis would probably expect me to give you brahmachari examples so that you stay in brahmacharya life. But anyway, but let's say you left and you purchased a house. Now, buying a house comes with so many of its own challenges. Things will break, things will need to be fixed. And it can become so time consuming that you might think, actually, I don't have time for my hearing, for my reading, for my chanting. I'm just going to focus on getting these things fixed and then I'll come back. Or like moving here, right? We were talking about how the beds got dismantled and everything got brought here. Like, I don't know how many days you had to shift.
1 day.
1 day. Okay, 1 day. Whatever it is, you know? But it's like, was the expectation that you leave everything behind and you just focused on moving? No. Because when we leave everything behind, we're basically saying that we don't have faith. We're not getting the mercy from Krishna to help things move forward. But there's this idea of dayabha. Dayabha, I think it's called. Yeah. This idea that actually, if you think of a child who's born in a very rich family, his parents are rich, then if that child just stays with the parents, associated with them in some way, then naturally all of that possession, all of the material wealth will come to the child, right? Because they're associating with the parent. Just by staying present, by not going away from home, not abandoning everything, at some point they inherit the parent's property, the parent's wealth. In the same way, a devotee stays fixed in their service, no matter what's going on in their life, because they know just by staying in my service, just by continuing the reading, the chanting, as much as the situation allows, but making sure we build the time into our schedule for it, God's property will naturally come to me. Achieving the spiritual world becomes my rightful claim because we've stayed in the association of Krishna. So no matter what happens in our life, we should stay in the association of devotees and Krishna. Whether you stay in the brahmacharya ashram, leave the brahmacharya ashram, the idea is that we don't want to leave Krishna, because as soon as we leave Krishna, we're giving up our rightful claim to the spiritual world. Because we expect the mercy to come. Krishna says, Sarva dharma pratyaja mamekam sharanam vraja, aham tvam sarva papebhyo mokshayashyam mimashuchaha. He says that abandon everything and just take shelter of me. And when we take shelter of Krishna, Krishna promises his mercy. He promises us to save us from all the misery, all the impiety. He says, do not fear. Based on that statement, so many devotees come to spiritual life. So many devotees go, yes, Krishna promised that if I go deep in my spiritual life, he's got my back. Because he said it. Krishna says it. And so we don't want to leave that, because as soon as we leave, we've basically said, Krishna, I know you promised that you've got my back, but I don't trust that. And therefore they've gone away, or they go away. And then why would Krishna's promise now be present? If I promise you that if you stay with me, if you come to me, if you stay with me, then I'll look after all your health, all your wealth, all your food, but then you decide to leave me, then you're no longer my responsibility in one sense. Krishna is more merciful, that's different. But it's our duty to then stay, if nothing else, because of the promise that Krishna has made. But the other aspect of adversity is that a devotee sees that whatever is going on is actually still part of Krishna's mercy. We accept the reactions, whatever bad is coming to our life, in the mood that actually I was meant to get this because of my previous karma. We spoke about good karma earlier, but there's also bad karma, right? Because of our previous activities, I was meant to get this reaction. Therefore, I've got it. But Krishna, you're so merciful that because I've come to you, you're not giving me the reaction to the same extent, to the same degree. You've minimized them. There's a pastime with Srila Prabhupada where one of his disciples was cutting vegetables, etc., for the deities. And at one point, they cut their finger. And so they were going, trying to get it bandaged, like plastered and stuff like that. And Srila Prabhupada saw. And then it came out that actually Srila Prabhupada was talking about, okay, like you should get it fit, deal with the situation, but so merciful. Your finger was actually meant to be cut off. But Krishna is so merciful that because you were chopping for Krishna, you only got a cut on your finger instead of your whole finger being cut off. Because the devotee sees that I'm meant to get so much more reaction for what I've done. If we just sat down for 5 minutes and just thought about all the bad things we've done just in the past year, past month, we'll feel like actually I should be getting a lot more bad reactions than I do right now. We'll genuinely feel that. In our attempt at being the first ones to see the deities, we push past the devotees. We might have even pushed somebody they actually moved away, not because they just stepped out of the way, but because we just budged them away, that they almost fell over. It's like, when does that happen to us? It's not happening to us. But in one sense, you could say we deserve it. It should happen to us. And there's a pastime with Dhritarashtra. So after the war, Dhritarashtra is the father of Duryodhana, who's on the Kauravas, the opposite of Arjuna's and Krishna's army. Dhritarashtra is a blind king who had 100 sons, and all 100 of his sons died in the war. So at some point, Dhritarashtra goes to Krishna and says, why me? He went through an adversity. All his 100 sons died, and he was blind. He goes, why me? Krishna says that actually 50 lifetimes ago, you were a hunter. And whilst you were hunting, you saw a bird and its 100 chicks in the nest on the tree. You basically shot your arrows, you blinded the bird, and you killed the 100 chicks. And that's why you're blind in this life and you lost 100 sons. But then the natural question Dhritarashtra asks is, that happened 50 lifetimes ago. Why now? Why not that life or the lifetime afterwards? And so Krishna describes that actually it took you 50 lifetimes to accrue the piety to have 100 sons. So in order to receive the reaction, the negative reaction of having 100 of his sins die, he needed 50 lifetimes worth of piety to have the 100 sons in the first place. So in our life, we may see that I'm doing so many good things. Throughout my whole life, I've done so much good karma. Why is this bad thing happening? But we can see that, like Dhritarashtra, he had to go through so many good things to happen before he experienced the bad reaction. Same way for us. We may have to develop so much good karma for us to then have the karmic balance to then experience our negative karma. But that's also Krishna's mercy. Because our goal is not to accrue good karma or bad karma. It's to have a bank balance of 0 across the two of them. And we want spiritual karma, akarma, to actually be prominent in our life. So that's here. That's expecting the Lord's mercy. Then the last two, remembrance and meditation, they're very, very much linked. It's generally described that remembrance is just a generic remembrance of the Lord. Sometimes we go through this where we may have heard a pastime, we may have heard a story of Krishna, Jagannath, Mahaprabhu, whoever, whichever personality, maybe even Srila Prabhupada. And then something happens around us, and it's like, oh, this is just like that. I remember once, this is going back maybe 1.5 years ago or something. No, longer than that. But we were basically on book distribution, and just after book distribution, we had gone to a house program, basically. Sometimes in brahmachari we do that, right? And I was with quite a young devotee, and he was just he wasn't so young, but was 12, 13 or something like that at the time. And he was just walking around, like just, you know, prying around, and he was just holding his hands like this. Yeah, like this. Does this remind you of anybody?
Yes.
Who? Jagannath, right? Because ecstatic mood, arms are pulled in, everything else, eyes are wide, etc. And I was like, wow, you know, you're walking just like Jagannath. That's remembrance, because somehow something reminded us of the Lord and therefore remembered the Lord. But then meditation is a much deeper thing, and it's described that there's 4 types of meditation: rupa, guna, krida, and seva. So rupa means form, right? Meditation on the form of the Lord. Guna means meditation on the qualities of the Lord. Krida, because you mentioned it earlier, activities of the Lord. And then seva, service to the Lord, right? And there's pastimes, different parts of the scriptures that help us with these meditations. So if we are develop the meditation on the rupa, there's so many verses in the Bhagavatam to describe what the Lord looks like. So many scriptures that describe what the Lord looks like. And off the back of those descriptions, we have paintings of Mahaprabhu. I don't know if there's Krishna somewhere. I think there was, right? Anyway, you know, you have depictions of, pictures of Krishna. The deities are deities as opposed to idols. One reason for that is that the carver, the one who's actually carving the deities, meditates deeply on the form of the Lord, and then based on that, they carve the deity. Whereas idols is just meant to one degree, it's mentally concocted presentations of the Lord. But deities are based on the meditations of the forms of the Lord described in the Shastra. Then guna, qualities of the Lord, right? So you may come across pastimes like, let's say Mahaprabhu going through the Jharkhand forest. The forest. In this pastime, Mahaprabhu is basically in ecstasy, he's on his way to Vrindavan, and he comes through a forest. He's dancing and singing through the forest, and all the animals join in with the dancing and the singing. It's described that even the tiger and the deer, where the tiger is basically the predator for the deer, they're embracing, hugging, and kissing, because that's how much love Mahaprabhu was basically oozing through his body. So we can meditate on that quality of love that Mahaprabhu had, that quality of love, compassion that Mahaprabhu had when we go through the pastimes. Then the next one, Krida, activities of the Lord. You know, again, Bhagavatam, Krishna book, very good examples of this. When you read through the Krishna book, Prabhupada says, in the evening, brahmacharis should have Krishna book and milk. The material world has cookies and milk. The devotees have Krishna book and milk. So you can read a bit of Krishna book each day in the evening, whilst honoring the hot milk. And, you know, maybe you find a pastime, like a pastime of the killing of the demons of Krishna, or the birth of Krishna, the migration of Krishna from Mathura to Gokul. And you just, you know, you read the chapter, you meditate on the chapter, you think about the chapter, and that becomes a meditation. Actually, when you look at deity service, then the pujaris, it's actually a meditation. The pujari service is actually a meditation. Then you've got seva, devotional service. Service, I think, devotional service, right? Seva means devotional service. There's a pastime, and I believe that's the one that's described here, I think. There's a brahmana, basically. So there's a brahmana who's very, very poor, and he doesn't really have any wealth or any elaborate sort of service. And one time he actually listens to a katha, right? Like he attends a class on devotional service. And in that class, he hears about how actually if one doesn't have the means to practice external devotional service, mananam seva, service in the mind, is as good as external service. So this Brahmana takes it to heart. He's like, I don't have the means to buy elaborate flowers, really nice decorations, cook really nice food, but I can do it in the mind. So he goes to the river, he washes himself, bathes himself, then he sits down and just meditates, right? He performs some pranayama to just focus his mind on service, and then he meditates. And he meditates about, okay, first thing he's doing is basically he's decorate the deity, he's bathe the deity, abhishek, etc. And then he's offered flowers, incense, water, dhup, all these things. He's performed arti. And now comes offering the bhoga. So he's cooking sweet rice, kheer, sweet rice. Now, those who know sweet rice know that the best sweet rice is when it's cooled down. It's not when it's piping hot. And so this Brahmana in his meditation is going, oh, the sweet rice hasn't cooled down yet. So he's just testing, like, how hot is the sweet rice? So he puts his finger in. And as soon as he puts his finger in, he feels the burn, and his meditation immediately gets ruined. So he opens his eyes. And he looks at his finger, and he sees that his finger is burnt. I don't know if I've got it in this one, but there's a picture of it in one of the versions of Nectar Devotion. Yeah. Right? You can just pass around if you want. There's this picture here. He feels his meditation, and it's actually burnt. The finger is burnt. And he's confused, like, how? Like, this was in my meditation, but it's actually burnt my finger. And in the spiritual world, it's described that Vishnu and Lakshmi were sitting together, and Vishnu was laughing at this. Like, he was seeing this happening, and he was laughing. And Lakshmi Devi was like, why are you laughing? And so Vishnu then calls for the Brahmana. He goes, like, bring the Brahmana here. And so the Brahmana comes, and Vishnu basically says that because of your mental service to me, so much meditative service, you had no external means to serve me, but you took the service on in the mind, fully conscious, I'm giving you a position in the spiritual. That's the power of mental service as well. This Brahmana had no means to perform the external service, so he performed it in the mind. And he got the benefit of a position in the spiritual world. So that's chapters 9 and 10. Different parts of, or angas of devotional service. And chapter 10 specifically talks about those 4 things that can really help us go deep, actually. Hearing, expecting the Lord's mercy, remembrance, and meditation. Because remember, spiritual life is about recognizing, the first point of spiritual life is recognizing we're the soul. Recognizing we're the soul means that we recognize that we're not this body. We have consciousness, which is a symptom of the soul. And so when we're sitting in Bhagavatam class, we may sit there with our physical body, with our mind, but are we sitting there with our consciousness? Because if we're sitting there without the consciousness, without being fully present in the class, then we're not actually present. Because there's 3 layers of identity for us: the body, the mind, and the soul. Thank you. The body and mind might be there, but if the soul isn't present in the kata, in the class, then are we actually present? Because we're the soul, we're not the body. So yes, chapters 9 and 10. Questions, comments? Any standout points that you want to share? Rupa Goswami's Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu ki, Srila Prabhupada's Nectar of Devotion ki. I was told 9 and 10, so hopefully that's it. Hare Krishna.
Everybody go in the Prabhuji.
I think I can do this with something.
Thank you, everyone. Hare Krishna.